Hello everyone, welcome. My name is Brittany and this is my mummy deep dive. I hope this is giving Evie. I know that it is technically an outfit that she wore in The Mummy Returns, which is the second one, but I just needed to work with what I had, okay? So hopefully this translates. This is giving Evie, I don't know, I did my best. What a momentous moment this is. When I started this channel, this is exactly the kind of content that I wanted to create. I knew that I wanted to do deep dives, and I love movies and entertainment so much. I love to dissect something until it's only little crumbs left over and I have consumed every last morsel. I love creators like Nicole Raffi and Mike's Mike and Jenny Nicholson and all of those people who just really go in on a topic, because I too am obsessive, and so I can greatly relate to that. So let's talk about one of my favorite movies of all time, The Mummy. And what a great time to discuss it, because we just got confirmation that in May of 2027, they will be coming out with a new one. And that is just so remarkable. And not only will there be a Mummy 4, but the original cast is all returning, which is just more than I could ever hope for. It's like the redemption that we are needing from the Mummy 3. We will not discuss the Mummy 3, but I just wanted to mention that's what it feels like. Now, before we get into it, I just would like to say that this movie truly shapes me into the person that I am. This is one of those formative movies that, like, when you see as a child, it stays with you. Like many people was, I know this is such a cliche, but baby, it was definitely a bisexual awakening for me. Every single person in that movie is so gorgeous on just a ridiculous level, except for maybe Benny. Maybe I'll draw the line at Benny and maybe the warden. I'm sorry, guys. No hate to you, but like, I don't know. Everybody else is just... Brendan Fraser, I have loved that man since Encino Man. Truly. Don't even get me started on what George of the Jungle did to me. Specifically, this scene right here was a confusing and amazing awakening for me as a young child. So... let's just establish that right now. Brendan Fraser really was like my first true crush besides Sean from Boy Meets World and Human Boy Casper. Big impact on me in my life. And he and Rachel Weisz's chemistry in this movie is like why I have such a high standard when it comes to romance, because wow. I don't think that there's any other couple on screen that can even match their chemistry. So the fact that they're coming back together, that's a huge point in letting me know that we're probably going to love this movie. I hope, you know, hopefully they know that they have a big undertaking on their hands and they don't want to mess up such an important thing to so many people. I remember the first time that I ever saw The Mummy was at my babysitter's house when I was probably too young to watch it. I went to bed that night, absolutely terrified. I don't think I slept a wink. I laid in bed and watched the open door. The crack of the door had the light on in the hallway. And I just stared at that all night long, thinking that Imhotep in like sand form was going to come through and kill me. So probably was too young to watch it, but still an amazing impact. And when The Mummy Returns came out, my babysitter's whole family treated that like it was a Super Bowl. And that was a big like core memory for me and my siblings, was watching that movie with everybody and just loving it, having like the best adventure. And that's the general consensus, is that this is like one of those movies that stands the test of time. People really love it. People return to it constantly. It's one of those fond memories that just like, it's a golden movie, and for good reason. It really does have everything. And it feels like it's hard to like find movies like that today. It's got the action and adventure. It's got the romance. It's got a good plot and lore. And it even does have some scary stakes and actually horror-based moments. So it kind of just has the whole package. It's very much like in the vein of Indiana Jones, and who doesn't love an adventure movie like that? So as most of you probably know, the movie is based off of the 1932 original, also called The Mummy. And that one is just a straight horror movie that came out in the golden age of horror, when movies like Dracula and Frankenstein and Wolfman and all of those movies were also coming out. That was a big time for horror. And it was played by Boris Karloff, was Imhotep, and that was right at the height of his fame when he had just done Frankenstein. It was directed by Karl Freund, who had just done Dracula, which was also a huge success. So it had made an impact on people even back in 1932. Now, the one that came out in the 90s, it led to many sequels and spin-offs. We have The Mummy Returns, which in my standards is like honestly a continuation of this movie. Like whenever I watch The Mummy, I have to also then rewatch The Mummy Returns because that's one of those perfect sequels. We will not be discussing, like I said, The Mummy 3. And I can say that because they came out recently and said that they will not be recognizing The Mummy 3 as canon in this new movie. And that is an excellent choice because The Mummy 3 was very controversial. It did not have Rachel Weisz as Evie. And not that there's anything wrong with the actress that played her, but the chemistry is just different. Brendan Fraser could have chemistry with a piece of toast, but it still was not the same. And that the chemistry between Rick and Evie was a big driving force in the Mummy movies that made people really root for them. So her not being in it was definitely a hit for the movie. And the reason that she wasn't in it is also controversial because she said that the script was lacking, so she didn't want to be a part of it. So not great. The movie also led to The Scorpion King, multiple Scorpion Kings. There was a cartoon of The Mummy, which I definitely watched. They even tried to revamp The Mummy with Tom Cruise in a whole new monster universe thing that they were going to kind of dole out, but that didn't go exactly planned, and I'll get into why. Okay, so let's get into the specifics of how The Mummy came to be, okay? So in the late 80s, there were two men, James Jacks and Sean Daniel. They wanted to revamp the classic horror and bring it into the modern world so that a new, fresh audience could love it. And they pitched it to Universal, who had originally made the 1932 Mummy. And Universal told them that they could have a $10 million budget, and that was it. They pretty much wanted a strictly just horror franchise, just kind of like low budget horror. That's all they wanted to put out because that's what they knew The Mummy to be. And they didn't really like think about what it could be. This led to many iterations being written and scrapped through the years. It literally took about a decade before this movie got off its feet and got into production. It went through many directors, many screenwriters, many different iterations that would have taken it in a completely different route. The basis of the original is like the framework of the current Mummy movie is still there. It is an ancient Egyptian priest is awakened by accident by Egyptologists. His name is Imhotep. And then he goes on a conquest to try and resurrect his lost love. So like, you know, the vein of the movie is still there. But in the meantime, there were many iterations, such as making Imhotep seem like a Terminator-esque kind of character that was just out to destroy the world and unstoppable. There were many where it was in the modern age, where it was like current, like late 90s, and they wanted to have it be modernized. And that would have been fine, but I feel like all of the action and adventure movies were kind of in that genre at the time. I mean, Terminator was huge at this time. So like it would have just kind of blended in with everything else and it wouldn't have stood out really in any way. Because they were kind of more leaning towards the horror aspect, they saw possible directors like Joe Dante, Sam Raimi, Wes Craven, which would have been amazing. That would have been really cool to see his iteration. If Joe Dante had been the director, he would have made it be Daniel Day-Lewis as Imhotep, which would have also been a very interesting choice. Many iterations came and went, and they just kept getting scrapped. They couldn't figure out nothing hit. There was just like no spark to any of it. So it sat there for a while, and it looked like it wasn't going to be picked up. And then in 1997, Stephen Sommers pitched the idea of having it be more of like a horror romance adventure, which is kind of like a genre that wasn't really a thing back then. There wasn't a mix of all of those put together. And he proposed that it be this kind of like Indiana Jones-esque thrill ride that would take you on an adventure with the characters, and there would be some comedy in there, but there would be also, you know, some stakes, and Imhotep would be kind of like this driving antagonist, but ultimately the focus would be on the heroes. And the studio loved this idea, and they loved it so much that they increased his budget and gave him the go ahead. And so they started the production. So let's talk about casting. So for Rick, there were so many big actors that were considered. And this is wild because, like, if I think of any of these people being Rick, it just makes it a whole different movie. Considered for the role of Rick were Tom Cruise, Brad Pitt, Ben Affleck, Matt Damon, even Leonardo DiCaprio. But for different various reasons, all of them had scheduling conflicts that wouldn't allow them to accept the roles. And then they offer the role to Brendan Fraser, who did show serious interest in it. And they loved him right away because he had this kind of like swashbuckling Errol Flynn sort of attitude. And that's exactly what they wanted for Rick. They wanted him to be this kind of rugged, rough around the edges kind of adventure hero type. So he fit perfectly. They were so happy. They cast Brendan. And thank goodness, I can't imagine anybody else playing that role. That man is perfectly cast. They did have a little trouble when they were casting Evie. It wasn't just an easy choice because at first they were stuck on her being American. And because of that, Rachel Weisz had to audition like 5 times before she got the role. And I'm really glad that they ended up going in the direction of her because they just like I said, like their chemistry is just unmatched. And a little fun fact for you, by the way, the character name Evelyn is in honor of Evelyn Herbert, who was the daughter of the Egyptologist that first uncovered King Tut's tomb. She was also present for that. So to honor her, they named Evie's character after her. And like I said, I grew up with such high expectations for romance because of these two characters' chemistry together. I fully believed that they were in love with each other in real life. And let me tell you, seeing this clip right here behind the scenes does nothing to tell me otherwise. Look at the way this man is looking at her. Are you joking? Yeah. That does not help the obsession. Now, Arnold Vosloo was cast as Imhotep. He wanted to do this on the pretense that Imhotep believed that it was the tragically Romeo and Juliet situation. This man wanted to find his love, and that is what he really wanted to play it as. So that, honestly, there's this element of Imhotep that, like, I can't hate the man. He's in love. Like, he's doing anything for the woman he loves, even if she doesn't deserve it, and, you know, we'll get in that more if we talk about the second movie. But this man just loves his woman, and I can't fault him for that. Yeah, sure, he does terrible things, but like he's just trying to save the love of his life. Hello? You can't make me hate him. So filming began in 1998 in May, and it lasted for 17 weeks, and it took place in the Sahara Desert and in Marrakesh, Morocco. It was going to be in Cairo, but there were kind of some sketchy political tensions going on, and it didn't feel very safe, so they decided to move it to Marrakesh where it would be safer for everybody. And this actually worked out nicely because it was a little bit not as advanced as Cairo, so set dressing and stuff for making it look like it was in the 30s was a lot easier for them. But even though it was a safer location, it still had a lot of trials and tribulations. They still faced many hardships during the filming of this movie. One big one being the elements. It was insanely hot. It was pretty treacherous when it came to like heat exhaustion and the sandstorms and the snakes and scorpions. The director did not tell the cast this until afterwards, but he actually had to also take out kidnapping insurance on all the main cast just to be safe, which that's scary. Because of the high risk of dehydration, the crew had to stop every 2 hours, and every person had to drink this mixture of sugar, salt, and water to stay hydrated. So it was kind of like it was a difficult undertaking for sure. The production ended in late August, and like, can you imagine filming a movie in late August in the Sahara Desert? I would rather die. Kill me. That sounds like actual hell. That sounds like they were in hell. All right, let's get into the plot, shall we? The movie opens up with this sweeping, beautiful shot of Thebes, which is known as the City of the Living, Pharaoh's crown jewel, and it's where Imhotep and Anaxamun also live. And girl, what I would give to see, if I could time travel, like I would love to just get a glimpse of what ancient Egypt looked like in like its prime, because it had to have been incredible. But anyways, Imhotep and Anaxamun are having a little bit of like a thing on the side behind Pharaoh's back. Anaxamun is only supposed to be the Pharaoh's, and she is not allowed to be touched by any other man, which like that's a little possessive, my guy. She can have right over her body. She literally has to wear body paint from head to toe. And this actress had to sit in this chair for 4 hours to get this body paint, by the way. She wears this body paint so that if anyone ever touches her, the pharaoh will know. And messy bitch Imhotep just immediately smudges her shoulder as soon as they start making out because he doesn't care. So, I don't know. Again, you could never make me hate this man. But as they're having their little tryst, the pharaoh does walk in, and it gets pretty soap opera pretty fast. And the pharaoh, which leads to Imhotep having to run off and take his priests with him, and to kind of like stop the Magi, who are the pharaoh's guards, to stop the Magi from running after Imhotep and let him get away. Anaxamun sacrifices herself, saying, "My body is no longer his temple," and offs herself, knowing that Imhotep will be able to resurrect her body. So then it shows Imhotep riding to Hamunaptra with his priests. And Hamunaptra is the city of the dead. It is where the wealth of Egypt is kept, and it's where Anaxamun is buried. And he goes and he exhumes her corpse. And sorry, I don't mean to laugh. It's just wild, the plot. He exhumes her body and begins the ritual to bring her back. And part of the setup is there are 5 jars with her vital organs in them, and that's very important. He lays her out, opens the Book of the Dead, and begins to recite the incantation. But he is interrupted by the Magi, and they take him and his priests, and they decide to mummify all of them alive. And he is given the Hamdai, which is one of the worst curses that you can put on a person. It's so bad that they never had even done it to anybody before. And they mummify him alive, and they close him up in a sarcophagus full of scarabs that are flesh-eating scarabs that'll do their work on him. And I can't imagine a worse death, truly. Arnold Vosloo actually had a really hard time filming this because he had to be wrapped up at like mummified bandages for like 4 or 5 hours. And it was very hard for him to stay calm through all of that, which the claustrophobia, I could never. They place his sarcophagus at the feet of the statue of Anubis to be guarded. And if he is ever let out, a plague will be released onto the world of men. So because of that, the Magi now make it their life's mission to guard and watch his sarcophagus so that no one will ever let him out. We then go forward in time, and we are in 1923 in Hamunaptra, and we see a standoff happening between a set of soldiers led by Rick O'Connell and an army of warriors on horseback coming at them. The narrator tells us that for 3,000 years, men and armies have fought to discover the riches in Hamunaptra, and the Magi have stayed there to make sure that they can never uncover the evils that lie beneath. Which, by the way, the narrator is a beautiful man, and we don't know his name yet, but we will. This man is played by Oded Fehr, and originally the Magi were supposed to be tattooed fully. Their faces were supposed to be completely covered in tattoos. But because this face card of his is so just amazing, they had to change it so that they wouldn't cover up his beautiful face, which excellent creative choice. No notes on that. In the standoff, all of the soldiers are killed except for Rick and his friend, Benny. Benny runs off and leaves him and leaves Rick to be killed. And right before Rick is about to be killed by many of the soldiers standing at the base of Anubis, suddenly the sand is disturbed and they hear a voice saying some kind of spooky incantation, and it spooks the horses and the men, and they run off, and Rick's life's saved. Then he runs away himself into the desert, and the Magi consider killing him, but they decide like the desert's going to take him anyway, so just let him go. And another fun fact, the roar that Imhotep makes in this movie is a mix of lions and bears, which is a tactic that they use in a lot of movies and shows. They did the same thing for the sound of the engines when the plane's crashing in Lost. They also did this for the sound of the tornadoes in Twister, because we have this visceral human reaction to be scared of those sounds. So they add it to loud noises in movies to like give us an extra bit of fear. So after Rick runs off into the desert and is presumed that he will die, we then cut to 3 years more ahead of time, and we are now in Cairo, and we are at the Museum of Antiquities, and we meet Miss Evie, and she is putting away books and kind of runs into a little bit of a dilemma and ends up creating like a cute little accident, you know, nothing too crazy. Just kidding. This stunt was so intense that if they messed this up once, it would have taken the entire day to reset just to film again. She somehow does not lose her job, but it's because the curator tells her that she is the daughter of their highest paying patrons, and it also helps that she can read and write Egyptian, and she's a good worker. And then after she has this little kind of conversation with the curator, she hears a noise and goes and investigates, and that's when we meet Jonathan, her big brother, who is hiding in a sarcophagus with a mummy, which is just so not cool. Jonathan gives off brother who got kicked out of boarding school for like drinking and gambling his inheritance money kind of vibes, and she lets him know the Bembridge scholars just rejected her application again. So Jonathan tells Evie that he has found something and he hopes that it is something valuable. She asks him where, and he says, oh, the dig in Thebes, you know. But I don't know. It seems like he's lying, and I wouldn't trust him. But she looks at it, and it's this kind of octagonal shaped box. She clicks a thing, and it kind of opens up. And in it is a scroll. And she tells Jonathan, I think you found something. So they take it to the curator, and they're looking, and it's a map. And she right away insists that it's a map to Hamunaptra. But the curator is very skeptical and tells her, whoa, that's just fantasy. There's no such place. We're Egyptologists, we're not treasure hunters. And she explains to Jonathan that this is where the wealth of Egypt is said to be hidden, and that there's also rumors of mummies and stuff like that, and there's curses and all that. But what she's really interested in is the Book of the Dead, the Black Book. That's what she's really after, and she would love to find it. The curator kind of writes her off, and then even accidentally burns the map like a psychopath. So now they don't have a full map to Hamunaptra, and they need someone that does. And Jonathan says, well, I might have fibbed a little bit about where I got that, so I think I know where we can get some help. So Jonathan and Evie go to prison, and this prison, by the way, is actually an apartment building in Marrakesh. Pretty cool. Would love to have lived in that apartment building during this time. They go to the prison, and they find Rick O'Connell, who is long-haired, scruffy, looking like he's right out of a romance novel. I cannot handle this man with long hair, okay? There's something about Brendan Fraser with long hair that just, whoa, it's too much. He is in trouble, and the warden says it appears that he had a very good time because he's actually scheduled to be... So as he's meeting Evie and Jonathan, he recognizes Jonathan and punches him in the face, and then gives Evie a big old smooch and tells her that if she wants his help finding Hamunaptra, then she needs to get him out of there. While he is like at the gallows and he's about to have his execution, she is trying to haggle with the warden and tells him like, I'll give you all this money, please just release him to me. They come to an agreement right as Rick is about to lose consciousness and he's cut down. And now this scene is famous for what happened behind the scenes. This is like one of those moments where, like in Lord of the Rings, when Aragorn kicks the helmet and everyone's like, did you know that Viggo actually broke his toe in this scene? Well, it's like that. This is when Brendan Fraser almost died from this stunt. What had happened was the rope was tightened a little too tight. They wanted it to look really real, and he was only on his tippy toes for the actual scene. So they did it too many times, and he blacked out and had to be resuscitated. And when he was resuscitated, the stunt coordinator actually said to him, you are now part of a very small elite group of actors who have had near-death experiences on sets. So not sure he wants to be a part of that group, but very cool, very freaky. Can't imagine. So the next day they're at the court and they are loading up onto a steamboat ready to take them down the Nile to Hamunaptra. And the warden comes along because he says that he wants to protect his investments. And then Rick shows up and he's all clean cut and shaven and beautiful in a suit. And Evie is definitely thinking about that kiss. And you can tell the girl's a little flustered. So they all start their journey down the Nile, and they meet a group of Americans on the boat with them. And it turns out, because Jonathan just doesn't know how to not run his mouth, that they all are heading to the same place. The actor Stephen Dunham, who plays Mr. Henderson, one of the Americans, they gave him that role specifically. They wrote the role of Mr. Henderson specifically for this man because he auditioned as Rick, and they liked him so much, but decided to not go with him, but they still really wanted him in the movie, so they wrote the part for Mr. Henderson for him. Their group is being led by an Egyptologist that knows all about Hamunaptra, but also they're being led by Benny, who is their guide and has been there before. But Rick is not super happy to see Benny again. So after they find out that the Americans are on their way there too, Rick kind of has a little moment with Evie. He rolls out his big roll of weapons on the table in front of her, very much in a display of, whipping it out. She asks him, are we going into battle? And he says, there's definitely something there, and I'm going to be prepared. And she happens to ask him, why did you kiss me, by the way? And he said, hey, seemed like a good idea at the time. And girl did not like that. Men are clueless, I swear. So she huffs and goes off. And then he has an exchange with Benny and throws his ass off the boat. And when he does that, he kind of looks down at the ground and sees that there are wet footprints leading like away from the boat, like someone climbed on the boat. And then it cuts to Miss Evie, and she's brushing her hair, getting ready for bed, and she's still super flustered about that kiss and is trying to just get it out of her head when all of a sudden a Magi warrior is in her room threatening her and asking, where's the map? Where's the key? She doesn't know what he's talking about because she doesn't know that little box thing that Jonathan found is actually a key. So she's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Rick comes bursting in like the hero that he is, guns ablaze, 2 pistols in hand, and is just shooting up everything. And the man gets lit on fire and runs through the place. And suddenly the ship is on fire. There's gunfire everywhere. It's suddenly a battle, very much like Indiana Jones vibes. And now they have to jump ship. So everybody jumps off the ship, gets out, big fun adventure scenes happening, classic, like people are jumping, sailing through the air, all that stuff. They get washed up on the shore, and Rick, Evie, Jonathan, and the warden are all on one side, while Benny, the Americans, the horses, everybody else are all on the other side. And Benny taunts him and says, hey, O'Connell, looks like we have all the horses. And Rick says, hey, Benny, looks like you're on the wrong side of the river. Love it. So iconic. So then Rick, Evie, and Jonathan and the warden now have to find, transportation. So they regroup at this small little village, get some camels. Evie has a little glow up moment. She gets a very cute outfit that Rick is definitely interested in. And they go on their way to travel the rest of the way to Hamunaptra. Once they get there, they are met with the Americans. Everybody is now waiting as the sun is about to rise. They have to wait for just the right moment because as the sun glints over the city, they will be shown the way. And the city appears like a mirage. Everybody takes off in a race to get there. And Evie wins like the bad bitch that she is. And now everyone is trying to access the city. The Americans have brought a team of men and they are working on excavating an entrance. And as they're doing that, the other group of the little guys are at the base of Anubis and they are trying to scale down into an area that has like a little bit of a crevice. Little cute moment where Rick hands Evie a bag of archaeological tools and he says, "Hey, I got these for you." And it's very cute. They scale down into this room where Evie lights it up with the system of mirrors and the light to reveal that they are in a large room that is actually for mummification. They recognize and note to each other that they are the first people in that room in 3,000 years, which is just insane. I would be terrified. As they are looking around, they hear just a chittering swarm of beetles just go by somewhere in the walls. And Rick says, "Sounds like bugs," which is excellent foreshadowing for what's to come. The sound design for the bugs was actually done. They used the worst sounds that insects make and put them all together, which is like effective and disgusting. They have a standoff with the Americans over who can excavate that room. Evie notices that there's actually a room below them. So she says, "You know what? You guys can take this area. We'll find somewhere else." And so as the Americans are doing their thing in that room, Rick, Evie, and Jonathan go a room down below, and they are working on kind of excavating the ceiling. While Rick, Evie, and Jonathan are kind of excavating the ceiling, the warden has snuck off, which, like, insane thing to do in an Egyptian tomb that hasn't been explored in 3,000 years, to just go off by yourself. But he has gone off by himself and he finds this wall that has these jeweled scarabs in them. And he starts kind of like chiseling them out and putting them in his bag. Then it cuts to the Americans, and they are forcing the excavators to keep digging and keep going, even though these men really don't want to. They have now come to like a door that needs to be removed, and they make the men do it. And suddenly a cloud of pressurized salt acid comes spraying out onto these poor men, and they are just like melted right in front of them. And it's awful. Clearly, the tomb should not have been opened. Good call on Evie's part, pivoting. Women are always correct. A live scarab beetle comes out of it and immediately cuts through his shoe and goes into his body. Well, at least that's what we can assume, because he's freaking out and like hitting himself and stuff like that. He rips his shirt open and you see it just climbing up through his skin, which is just disgusting and awful. And another little fun fact, this scene right here, for some reason, that actor decided that he didn't want to wear underwear that day. And so while he's freaking out and moving around and like, you know, hitting everything, there's actually a little moment where his little soldier slips out of his pants, and no one caught it, not even in the editing, anything. And that is in the final cut of the movie. So have fun Googling that. So then it cuts back to Rick, Evie, and Jonathan, and she's telling Rick about the process of mummification while Jonathan's just hitting golf balls because he is just there for the vibes. Diva is not very helpful at all. And as they're doing that, a huge sarcophagus just drops from the ceiling right in front of them. There's an inscription on top of the sarcophagus, and it reads, "He who shall not be named," which, okay, Voldemort vibes. They notice that it's locked and requires a key. Evie, the genius that she is, realizes that the little box thing that Jonathan gave her is the shape of the key that they need. But before she can open it, they hear screaming, and the warden comes running through and runs straight into a wall, dropping dead. So things are not boding well for the first day of this excavation. That night, they sit at the camp and they are just talking about all their misfortunes and everything that's been happening. And as they are, the Magi come and attack. And there is another sequence of gunfire and horses blazing and everything's going crazy and wild and people are running for their lives and Jonathan's trying to drink alcohol with Benny in the process. It's all just crazy fun adventures. And they stop when Rick threatens to blow the bitch up pretty much. And the Magi warriors tell him that he needs to leave. After that, the trio decided to just get right proper sloshed because it's been a day. And once they're pretty drunk, Evie is hanging out with Rick. Jonathan's passed out. Evie says that cute little classic thing. I bet you're wondering, what's a place like me doing in a girl like this? She explains to him that her father was a very famous explorer, Slay, and that he loved Egypt so much that he married her mother, who was an Egyptian. And so Egypt is in her blood, and that's why she's here, because she has to know she needs to excavate what she can. And she tells him, I am a librarian. The next day, the Americans pull out a chest from that little cavern that just killed their men. And again, on the chest, the men that are left see and run for their lives because they don't want any part of this. They see that it's cursed. The instructions on the chest are pretty fucking specific, and they say that whoever opens the chest will be cursed and a plague will be placed upon men. So they don't want anything to do with that. They make the Americans open the chest themselves. When they do, they find the Book of the Dead and the 5 jars that they don't know, but the jars contain Anoxinamun's 5 vital organs. They all just think that, oh, this is great treasure. I'll take one each for myself. Rick, Evie, and Jonathan open up the sarcophagus. And when they open it, Rick, Evie, and Jonathan, in the meantime, open up the sarcophagus. And when they open it, Imhotep's mummified, gross body kind of pops out and gives them a jump scare. And Evie says, he looks still juicy. And it's pretty gross. They see that on the inside of the sarcophagus is scratched the inscription that reads, "Death is only the beginning." They see that this poor man has been mummified alive. That night, again, everyone is sitting at the camp and the Americans are showing off their jars and treasures. And Evie notices that the Egyptologist has the Book of the Dead. Evie explains that the mummy was given the Hamdai and that the lore goes that if anyone is ever brought back from that they will bring about the 10 plagues. When everyone is sleeping, for some reason, Evie's reckless ass takes the Book of the Dead from the Egyptologist and opens it up and starts reciting things. And now this is kind of insane. Like, you would think she would know not to do this because girl is an Egyptologist and that's like rule number 1. That is a big no-no. As soon as she reads the Egyptian text, just swarm of locusts descends on the camp, just consuming people. And they used real locusts for this scene. It was very hard for the actor that played Dr. Chamberlain, the Egyptologist, to sit still. They had to take many takes in this scene because he could not sit still with locusts just crawling all over his body, which, like, hey, that's fair. I get that. So to seek refuge, many people run into the tomb to get away from all the bugs. And in the process, there's an American that has glasses on and he trips and falls and his glasses go flying and his friends just run off without him as he's screaming, my glasses, my glasses. And then Benny comes running by and steps on the poor man's glasses and shatters them and just keeps running. And this part always, like, genuinely made me feel so sad for this man as a child because there's something so vulnerable and innocent about someone losing their glasses and their glasses breaking. Like, that just breaks my heart. And suddenly, once this moment happens, like, we are all of a sudden thrust into the horror aspect of things. It gets very, like, the tone really shifts. And suddenly this man is, like, all by himself in this cavernous walkway. He cannot see. All he can see are blurs. And he's trying to walk around and find his way out. And you even see a glimpse of, like, a silhouette of what looks like a person standing there. And then he kind of turns around and screams. And it cuts away from him. And it cuts to Rick, Evie, and Jonathan, and they're also running through the tomb trying to get away. And all of a sudden, a big mound rises from the ground and outbursts tons of these flesh-eating scarabs, and they come chasing after them. So now they have to run for their lives from the scarabs. And in the process of doing that, Evie gets separated from Rick and Jonathan and kind of like goes through this revolving trap door into another room by herself. But she's not by herself. She sees the American man with the glasses on the ground facing away from her. So she goes over, she says, "Oh, thank goodness. I'm so glad I'm not by myself." And he turns to face her, and his eyes and tongue are cut out of his body. And it's like, fuck, that is not cool. That is not safe. Something bad has happened. She screams and freaks out. And then all of a sudden, Imhotep steps out of the light, and you see the mummified corpse that he is come walking towards her, and he's got the man's eyes and tongue. Imhotep walks up to Evie and in ancient Egyptian says, "Come with me, my princess, Anaxanamun." Not good. That's not good, my girl. Rick comes running in and finds her and sees Imhotep, screams, of course, and shoots at him, which allows them to get away, but it does not kill Imhotep. He's undead. As they run out and they are now in the open, the Magi find them, and Oded Fehr, who is the narrator and the leader of the Magi, tells them, "Y'all need to go. Get the hell out of here, because you have now released evil onto this earth." Meanwhile, by the way, Benny has a close call with Imhotep. Imhotep almost kills him, but Benny is a sellout bitch and has every form of religion around his neck and just starts reciting prayers until he finds one that lands. And he says Hebrew, and Imhotep says, "Ooh, the language of the slaves. I can use you." So Benny is spared and is now Imhotep's little servant boy. And he asks Benny, "Where are the jars?" That's what Imhotep's after. He wants all those jars. He's ready to bring his girl back. So now everyone is back in Cairo and very shaken up for good reason. They have the man with no eyes and tongue up in his room. And Rick is trying to pack all of Evie's stuff and is like, "We need to get the hell out of Cairo. This is not our fight." And Evie keeps unpacking all the stuff that Rick is packing for her and says, "This is exactly our fight. I'm not leaving. We are definitely going to figure this out because we just resurrected a mummy. And that is like some wild shit. I'm not leaving." And he tells her, like, "Lady, no mortal weapons can kill this thing. We gotta go." And she refuses. So he gets mad and goes down to the bar because he can't deal with her. And while he's down at the bar, he is hanging out with the Americans and Jonathan, and everybody's like kind of just reminiscing about how crazy this is, and they don't know what they're going to do. That is when we meet the cutest little gentleman named Winston, who's like someone's drunk uncle, pretty much. This man is wonderful, and he will become useful for us in a little bit. We then cut to the American who has his eyes and tongue cut out, and he has guests with him, and it's Benny and Prince Imhotep is what they call him. And at first he's just saying hello, and then Benny says to him, "Prince Imhotep would like to thank you for your hospitality and your eyes and your tongue, but unfortunately more is needed." It cuts back to the bar and all the girlies are taking shots, but then everybody in the bar collectively just spits their drink out because the drinks and even the water that's in the fountain has all turned to blood. And it's another one of the curses has started to play out. Rick finds Evie and tells her that they have an even bigger problem right as raining fire meteors start showering down from the heavens, and another plague has come. Things are not going well. Things are bad for all of them, okay? The girlies are not vibing. Then they go bursting into the American's room with the eyes and tongue missing, and they see that the man is now just a shriveled husk, and Imhotep has regenerated even further because he has consumed this guy's essence pretty much. He tries to woo Evie again, but a cat comes into the room and the man loses his absolute shit and turns into sand and just tornadoes out of the room. So they're all like, what the fuck is going on? So to try to find answers, they head to the Museum of Antiquities. And when they get there, Oded Fehr is actually already there talking to the curator. And it turns out that the curator is also part of the Magi. And that's why he was trying to keep them from going to Hamunaptra in the first place. They are trying to brainstorm a way to defeat Imhotep. And they talk about how the cats were ancient guardians of the underworld. So as long as he is not fully regenerated, he will be scared of cats, which is like just that's a good little helpful tip for them to keep in their back pocket. Evie tells them that he called her a Nox on a moon, and they're like, hey, that's not great. That is his lost love, and he's going to try to resurrect her and sacrifice you in the process. So as they're all discussing this, a solar eclipse kind of passes over the sun. Jonathan quotes the Bible and he says, and he stretched forth his hand towards the heavens, and there was darkness throughout the land of Egypt. And like, it's a very ominous moment. There's really good, like, ominous, spooky moments in this movie that just set the tone. Like, it really does feel like things are not good. So back in their rooms, they decide that they have to find the Egyptologist, Dr. Chamberlain, who has the Book of the Dead. While they sort that out, Rick kind of barricades Evie in a room and tells her, you're not going anywhere. I'm going to go find him. And tells the Americans, do not let anyone in or out of this room. That moment, by the way, is pretty, maybe it's toxic of me for loving it, but damn, I love that moment. He just throws her over his shoulder and then tosses her on the bed. And like, I'm not upset with it. I'm sorry. I'm ridiculous. I know. So Rick and Jonathan go into Dr. Chamberlain's room and they can't find him, but they find Benny tearing the place up looking for something. And that's when we get the most iconic moment where Rick just grabs a chair and launches that bitch like a missile at Benny's back and just explodes the chair against that poor man. In real life, that would have broken his back, but it's such a satisfying moment. And Benny tells them Imhotep's plan, that he is looking to acquire all of the jars and regenerate so that he can bring his lost love back. And then it cuts to Dr. Chamberlain kind of running around terrified, clutching the book to him in like what seems like alleys in the darkness. And he's clearly being chased by somebody. Rick asks Benny, by the way, why he's doing this. And Benny says, it's better to be at the right hand of the devil than in his path, which I can't help but compare to just the current political climate that we're in the US. That's all I'll say. We then cut to a crowd of people dispersed in horror, and on the ground is the shriveled up body of Dr. Chamberlain, and Imhotep is standing over him, more regenerated, almost like fully regenerated now. And he has the book, and he has like 3 of the jars now. Not great. After that, it cuts to a couple of the Americans sitting and standing guard outside Evie's room. And one of them says, I'm going to the bar. And Mr. Henderson says, hey, get me whiskey. I'll just sit here. And pretty much immediately, as soon as the guy leaves, Imhotep comes in and sucks this guy's soul out and kills him. So he is not very useful. As Evie is sleeping in her room, Imhotep returns. He kind of returns in sand form through the keyhole and comes into her room. And he sits over her bed as she's sleeping and he says, a Nox on a moon. And then kneels down and kisses her, which, like, not great. She was not consenting. Not great, Imhotep. And she wakes up in terror as the man is trying to kiss her. And then Rick comes bursting into the room with a cat. Imhotep gets scared off again, tornadoes out of the room once more, and then they say, we gotta go. So once again, the gang rushes to the Museum of Antiquities to try to gain answers. Evie says that she's pretty certain that because the Book of the Dead, the Black Book, brought him back to life, that the Book of Amun-Ra, the Gold Book, could kill him again. So they discover that the Book of Amun-Ra is, of course, in Hamunaptra. So that's where they got to go. But they are met with a mob of like zombie-like men that are just going, Imhotep, Imhotep. Jonathan says, oh, cool, my favorite plague, boils and sores. They are all just following Imhotep's orders in this zombie-like way. And Imhotep is almost completely whole again. They try to zoom off in the car, and they are completely swarmed by the zombie-like men. And in the process, the last American gets thrown off of the car. Imhotep just sucks the soul out of that man, as he would. And now he is fully regenerated. They try to zoom off, but they can't get far, and they have to jump out of the car. The rest of the group gets swarmed as well, and Imhotep comes up, takes Evie, and instead of them trying to fight, because there's no way, they're outnumbered, Evie says, I will go with him, but you better come and save me. Oded Fehr stops Rick from fighting and tells him they still have to go to Hamunaptra. Okay, like, we will regroup and we will get there. And Rick points his torch at Imhotep in this really hot moment and says, I'll be seeing you again. I believe him. So then as Imhotep walks away with Evie, of course, he tells the mob to kill all of them. And so Rick and the guys have to escape down a storm drain. But the curator stays behind and tells them to go, and he fights off the crowd while they get away. But he gets killed. So R.I.P. curator, thank you, you're a real one. So now Rick, Ardeth Bey, and Jonathan have to find help, and they have to get to Hamunaptra as fast as they can. So they employ the help of Mr. Winston, who is found in the desert having a little cunty tea moment. And they tell him, you know, the stakes are high, but we need your help. And Winston asks, well, what's the job? And Rick says to him, you need to rescue the damsel in distress, kill the bad guy, and save the world. He does tell Winston you probably won't survive in it. And Winston says, I am so in. So they have a pilot. As they're flying away on their plane, it shows they have literally had to strap Jonathan and Ardeth Bey on the wings of the plane. And Jonathan is having a horrible time, but Ardeth Bey is living. He is having so much fun. He's probably just happy to be relieved of his duties of having to guard Hamunaptra for the first time in his life. So let him enjoy himself. And as they're flying, they notice an enormous sandstorm off in the distance. And Winston says, that's actually the biggest one I've ever seen. Cut to the sand tornadoes that are happening, and suddenly Evie and Benny are spit out of one. And it turns out that the sandstorm is actually Imhotep, which, like, hey, sandstorm travel, that's great. Like, way to be environmentally friendly with that one, Imhotep. I'll give it to you. Imhotep sees the plane and conjures up a huge sandstorm that goes after them. Rick tries to shoot at it in vain, as literally the face of Imhotep appears at the front of the sandstorm trying to, like, swallow them up. And right as they're about to be swallowed up, Evie, in desperation, grabs Imhotep's face and gives him a big old kiss that distracts him long enough for the sandstorm to dissipate. But it wasn't quick enough, and the plane had already been overtaken by the sandstorm, and it crashes. They climb out, but they see that poor Winston did, in fact, not make it. And the sand actually swallows up the plane and just it disappears. So R.I.P. Winston, you were a real one, you were a bad bitch, and you went out like a G. They turn and look, and they realize that they are all back at Hamunaptra. So it's time. It cuts to Benny and Evie and Imhotep going into the tomb. And as Benny is kind of like forcing Evie down into the tomb, she looks at him and reads him to filth and tells him that karma always comes to two-faced skanks like him. So better watch out, which, love you, girl. Yes. It cuts to the guys who are trying to move a big pile of rocks that Imhotep put in place so that they couldn't get through. Ardeth Bey and Rick are definitely putting their backs into it and moving things. And Jonathan is just not being helpful at all and actually finds a scarab jewel, and immediately the scarab comes out, goes into his arm, and starts traveling up him. And in a very quick decision, Rick cuts the scarab out of him, and it goes onto the ground and comes at them, but he shoots it. And in the process of shooting it, the others are alerted, and Imhotep knows now that the men are here to save Evie. So he resurrects a bunch of mummy guards to go and take care of the problem. As the men are moving through the corridors, Rick finds an area where he can use Evie's method of using the mirrors to light the way with torches, and he lights the room, and they discover an enormous wealth of treasures and gold and everything. And it turns out that all of the legends and lore about holding the wealth of Egypt were true, and it's all in this room. And Jonathan is very tempted and wants to take some plunder for himself, but Rick says, don't you dare touch anything in here. As they are walking through that area, Imhotep's mummified priests come up and start attacking them. And so now they're all having to fight for their lives. And as that's happening, Evie wakes up on an altar and she kind of looks over, and right next to her is the mummified body of Anaxanamun. And the jars are there. The book is open. Like, Imhotep is ready to perform the ritual. So it then cuts back to the guys. And as they're running from the hordes of mummies, they find a room with the statue of Horus where Evie suspects the book is. The Book of Amun-Ra. By the way, as it does this, it quickly cuts to Benny's bitch ass, who is trying to take loads of gold out to the camels so that he can just get away with a bunch of the treasure. And he's like clearly struggling. The camels do not like him. And it's funny because this is actually like behind the scenes, the camels legit did not like this actor. For some reason, they all disliked this man. And every time that he was in a scene with the camels, like they hated him. So it's like, hey, why did the camels hate you, my guy? What was that about? What kind of energy are you putting off? So then it cuts back to Rick and the guys who are fighting off all these mummies. And they find the Book of Amun-Ra at the base of Horus, like Evie thought. And Ardeth Bey says, I will fight them off. You guys need to run, okay? You need to get out of here. I'm going to go sacrifice myself. Which, like, no, you are way too beautiful. Don't go. But he does, because he is a true soldier. He is a true warrior that will protect what he is meant to do. So he runs off and gives Rick and Jonathan a chance to run away. We cut back to Imhotep, and he is performing the ritual, and there's like a primordial pool of souls that is in front of them that's giving like early 2000s kind of like Linkin Park music video vibes, you know, very like silvery, very, the CGI was doing its best back then. Okay. I'm sure it was groundbreaking at the time. Out from the pool emerges this like ghostly spirit body of Anaxanamun, and it travels over to her corpse and settles down. And as it does, she is brought back to life and breathes like and is brought back to life. And Evie's like, y'all need to hurry. It's about to happen. So Imhotep stands over Evie with this huge gold dagger and is about to complete the ritual. He's about to sacrifice her. But then Jonathan comes in shouting that he's found the Book of Amun-Ra. And like, not so smart, my guy, because like, I mean, yes, you did save your sister, but you've now alerted Imhotep. So now Imhotep goes after Jonathan. And as Imhotep's going after Jonathan, Rick jumps in with a sword to protect Evie from all of the soldiers that are all around. And he's fighting them off and everything. And this scene's pretty cool because like, it looks legit like Brendan Fraser is fighting all of these mummies. But in reality, like, there's no one there. That's all CGI. So he's just fighting air. So good acting on your part, sir. Jonathan doesn't know what he's doing, and he reads an inscription thinking that it will help him, but it awakens more soldiers to go after Rick and Evie. And while that's happening, Anaxanamun is also going after Evie to try to kill her. Evie tells Jonathan, though, if he can finish the inscription, then he can control the guards. Like, he will be the master. He happens to read the rest of the inscription right before Rick is almost killed by the guards, and they just stop, and they stand up, and they go after Anaxanamun and they kill her. And Imhotep sees this and he's devastated because, like, again, the love of his life is just killed, and he keeps trying to bring her back. Like, this would be so frustrating. I would be so pissed off. Imhotep goes to kill Jonathan, but Rick chops his arm off. But then Imhotep just bitch slaps him across the room and then literally screws his arm back on his body because he's immortal and he can just attach it back to himself. Evie and Jonathan unlock the book while Imhotep is just serving Rick a fresh ass whooping. Like, that's a serious bitch slap that he gives him. Evie reads the inscription that is needed, and a ghostly chariot appears and comes ripping through and takes Imhotep's soul out of his body and rips it out of him and sends it and like runs off with it. And Imhotep's like, no! So now he's mortal. The man is mortal and can be killed. He doesn't know that, though, and he charges at Rick. Rick impales him, and Imhotep stumbles back and realizes like, oh no, because he is mortal now and he can be killed. He stumbles into that pool of like primordial soul goop, and they immediately start to kind of take him, and he just kind of starts sinking in. And like this, it truly looks like an early 2000s cover of a CD right here, doesn't it? It's like one of the hardest Y2K band covers I've ever seen. While all this is happening, Benny's greedy ass is still trying to get a bunch of treasure. And in the process, he hangs one of the bags on this like piece of column sticking out, which is clearly a lever. He hangs the bag on it, and it makes the lever go down, and immediately all of the walls start shaking and coming down because there's like he's activated some kind of like ancient security system, and all of the walls are now closing in. So Rick, Evie, and Jonathan have got to get the hell out of there fast, and they start running for their lives. And as they're running, Jonathan accidentally drops the Book of Amun-Ra into the primordial goo and loses it. But they're like, we don't got time, we gotta go. So they are like, the walls are coming down, everything is being crushed. It's so scary. This would be terrifying. They are running for their lives, and they kind of have to squeeze through and crawl through because the walls are coming down. And Benny tries to get out, and Rick gives it a serious effort to save this man, but he can't. And he says, goodbye, Benny, and has to let him go. And Benny has to crawl down, and he's stuck now in the room of the treasure. And the walls are coming down, and they finally settle, and it is like silent. And the only light that this poor man has is the torch that he's holding. And as he's standing there, all of the scarabs just come in, and they like circle him and are just waiting for his torchlight to go out. And then slowly his torchlight starts to go out. And as it goes to darkness, you just hear them all descend upon the man, and he's screaming in terror, and disgusting sounds ensue. That is like one of the scariest ways to die that I could ever imagine. I can't think of anything scarier. That would be awful. And as the group is running out and running for their lives, all of Hamunaptra is just collapsing and literally turning over like icebergs all around them, because that's the failsafe, was that if anything were to happen, like literally the city would upend itself. And they run for their lives and get out of there. And as they're doing that, they get back to the horses, and they're kind of like surveying the area, and they're like, oh my God, thank goodness we got out. They're standing there completely in shock that they're alive, and a hand reaches down and touches one of them, and they look back, and it's Oded Fehr on his horse, and Ardeth Bey has lived. And he is just smiling and so happy because he thinks like everything's good, you know, just chilling there like nothing happened, like they didn't just go through the most traumatic shit ever. And he's like, hey, good work, y'all. I'm going to go now. And he just kind of like rides his horse off and leaves them. And that's it. And then they all get on their horses. And then in true adventure movie fashion, Rick and Evie kind of look at each other in this loving way and give one of the best movie kisses ever. Like, it is so, oh God, the chemistry between these two is insane. Okay. So they have their happy ending moment. Jonathan kind of bitches a little bit, and he's like, we don't have anything. And they're like, no, we're good. We're good. We're fine. We have everything we need. And they get on their horses. Rick and Evie are sharing one. Actually, no, sorry. I think they're camels. Rick and Evie get on their camel, and they're sharing, and they ride off into the sunset. And then it happens to glint that the sacks that the camel is holding are full of treasure that Benny stole. So they'll be just fine. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the 1999 cinematic masterpiece, The Mummy. So The Mummy premiered May of 1999. It was, of course, an instant hit. This movie did amazingly. It earned $422.5 million worldwide, making it the sixth highest grossing movie in 1999. And that was a huge profit for a movie that took $80 million to make. That's over 5 times its budget cost. Like, that's a huge success. And The Mummy Returns would also go on to be insanely successful, making over $435 million when it premiered in 2001. So like they did great. The third one was profitable as well, but it was met with a lot of criticism and fans like were not so happy about it. The Mummy that they tried to recreate in 2017 with Tom Cruise, it was also profitable, but the problem was that they had spent so much on the budget of the movie that like it almost just equaled out. Those first two movies were lightning in a bottle, and I really hope that they don't fumble the fourth one because like it really is so beloved by so many fans. And I think that they do know that. I think that they know that they need to honor the legacy, and I trust that they aren't going to mess this up for us because I will be there. I will be at that premiere. You know I will. I'm very excited to see Rick and Evie's relationship on screen again and just watch their chemistry and have an adventure. And the fact that like even Arnold Vosloo, who plays Imhotep, like he is being signed on. So like Imhotep is going to make an appearance in some way. So like we are getting truly like our original Mummy cast is going to be there. And I feel like that is such a huge part in like just knowing that everything's going to be okay. Anyway, I loved making this and I definitely want to do The Mummy Returns as well. And I would really love if you guys enjoyed this to please give this some love. Let me know. It'll be a great indicator of let me know that like this didn't suck and you guys do want to see the second part. So like and subscribe and all of those things, you know the drill. I love you guys and I love The Mummy and I love discovering our community. So like this is so much fun and this is exactly the kind of content that I want to create. So there will be more of this. Whether or not you guys like it or not, I probably will be making the Mummy Returns video, so it doesn't really matter. All right, well, I'm gonna go edit this bitch, so I'll see you guys later. Sorry.